Hey there, welcome to Board Gems. In this video series, I like to talk about older board games, ones that often that I find to be gems. This intro is going to be a little bit longer than some of my usual videos because I want to introduce not just a game, but a style of game. Game styles change over time, just like, for example, music styles change over time. You can listen to a top 40 radio station and know what's popular right now, but if you've never heard swing or big band or 70s prog rock or something, you might not know whether you like those styles of music. And if you're exposed to them, you might go, hey, this is actually something that I like and I want to explore more. Don't necessarily expect that the thing that's most popular right now is necessarily going to be the same thing that you find a favorite. Just like other artistic mediums, game design styles change over time. The mechanisms used, the player interactions that develop in a game, this style changes over time. I want to take you back in time to the 90s. Up until around the early to mid 2000s, this particular game originally came out from Kosmos 2003. This is a new version that's coming out on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter might already be live by the time you see this video. Some of us call this style of game OG, for old school German style games. You know what? Phrases, definitions change over time. We used to call them Euro games, but now Euro game means a different thing, so now we use a different term to describe the particular style of Euro game that appeared in the 90s to early 2000s. The games that came out back then tended to, not always of course, I'm speaking in generalities, but they tended to have simpler rule sets, and the complexity would come from the interactions between the players. It wasn't hard to learn how to play the game, but it was necessary to learn how to play it well. And being able to play it well meant being able to analyze the game state to some degree, to look at other players, see what they're planning, what their intentions are, and see how you can take advantage of that to your benefit. There's some great designers who worked in this space, famous names in the hobby like Wolfgang Kramer and Rainer Knizia. If you don't know the name Leo Colovini as well, you probably should. He had a number of amazing game designs that came out in the 90s and 2000s. Some of his most famous designs include Cartagena, which I've covered, Carolus Magnus I've covered, Clans, which I will cover at some point, and this one, Bridges of Shangri-La. It's for 3 or 4 players. The new edition has rules for 2, which I apologize I have not tried. Ages 10 and up, and playtime is about 60 minutes, and I think that's all pretty fair. It's not that the game is hard to learn. The simplest games, like a Ticket to Ride, for example, would usually say is 8 and up, but there is more of a thoughtfulness to it, a more of a planning ahead that you have to take into account. And in terms of the time frame, if everybody's familiar with the game, you can bang out a game in half an hour. It lends itself to a more thoughtful, slow-paced game experience. The game board shows a number of villages with 7 spaces each. Each space corresponds to a discipline, I suppose, of which each village can have 1 master. Each master can have a student, an apprentice, and the goal of the game is to have the most masters on the board by the end. And you do that by training students and sending them out to other villages. If a student arrives in a village that has no master, then the student becomes the master of that discipline in that village. What gets tricky is you don't necessarily just move your students. You also move the students of your opponents. When you pick a movement, a journey of the students to a new village, you're taking all the students of that village and moving them to the new village. For some, the students will become new masters easily. For others, that village will already have a master. And then you have to look and see which village is considered more enlightened. That is to say, it has more scholars, more students and masters in it, would be considered the more enlightened village, and then any student or master from that more enlightened village would win out in the competition between the two. And whenever students travel from one village to another, the path they take is destroyed. That's why it's the Bridges of Shangri-La. Each path between 2 nearby villages has a bridge which can only be traveled across once. I will be showing you this new version from Play for Keeps. This is a preview edition, so there might be some changes in the final product, but I will show you how it plays and I will talk more about it afterwards. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. If you're not playing with a full complement of players, some of these villages on the board will not be in play. And you're going to take what this game calls a piece marker, and you're going to place it on top of the village to show that that is not in play. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game. In the 3-player game, this village is not in play. For all the other villages, place a bridge on the path between them. Now each player is going to take all their scholars. They are of 7 different types, but each player is going to take one of each of the types of scholars into their hand. On a player's turn, they're going to pick one of their scholars and place it on an empty spot somewhere on the board, with restrictions based on number of players. So each village cannot have more than a certain number of these scholars, and one player cannot have too many in the same village. But for your first game, the rulebook will have an example setup, and I strongly recommend going with that for your first game. After initial setup, you're ready to begin. Bridges of Shangri-La shows a number of villages, and in this village are scholars in one of 7 different disciplines. That's these here. So each village can have at most one master of each discipline. A scholar, that's one of your pieces, directly on the board is a master. So this village has 2 masters. Each master can have at most 1 student. And to show a student, you will place the student on top of the master like this. There will never be stacks of more than 2. Each master can have at most 1 student. This village has 3 scholars, 2 masters, and a student. Your goal is to have the most masters on the board by the end of the game. In order to have more masters, you can place down a master directly on the board, but you can also train students and then have those students migrate to new villages where they can become masters. On your turn, you do one of 3 things. You can place a new master, you can train 2 students, or you can initiate a journey of students from one village to another across a bridge. Placing a master is very simple. You pick a village in which you already have 1 master, you pick one of your remaining pieces of a different discipline for which the space in that village is empty. Or you can train students. You pick any 2 masters of yours that are on the board that do not already have students and give them students. Blue could have this moon master get a student and could get this mushroom master a student. They can be in the same village or different villages. The third option you can do on your turn is to initiate a migration. The students will set out on their journey to another village where they hope to become masters. To initiate a journey, you pick a village that you have at least 1 student in. You will take all the students from all the players in that village, and you will pick a bridge to cross that travels to another village. Let's suppose Blue picked this village. They would take all the students, their own as well as Red's, and pick a village to migrate to across a bridge. Let's say they pick this bridge. They cross the bridge into this village. For each of these students, you look and see, does the village already have a master of that type? They do not. Neither of them do, which means these students become the masters in that village. And on a later turn, they could train students themselves. Importantly, after a migration, the bridge gets destroyed. So no migrations between these 2 villages are possible anymore. But what happens if the village already has a master? Let's suppose Blue picks this village. They do have 1 student, so that's allowed. They would take all the students, which in this case is just 1, and they cross this bridge into this village. There's already a master of that type. Determine which village is considered stronger. The stronger village is the village with more scholars, masters and apprentices. In this case, this village has 3 scholars This village has 2. So this is considered the stronger village. When this student comes across the bridge into this village, in this case, because this village is considered stronger, the source is considered stronger than the destination, black would actually get this piece back, and blue becomes the new master in that village. And again, the bridge is destroyed. If there's a tie, so if it looked like this, in the case of a tie, for number of scholars, you count the number of masters. And in this case, it's again the same, 2 in each village. The second tiebreaker is, well, defender wins ties. So if this student was to travel across this bridge to here, these villages are equal in strength, so the defender would win ties. And what would happen to this scholar? Actually, it would get returned to the player's supply. There is no place here for such a scholar, so this piece would get returned to the player's supply. But still, the bridge would get destroyed. So on your turn, you pick one of those 3 things. Place down a new master, somewhere where you already have a master. Pick 2 masters that don't already have students, and give them students. Or initiate a journey of students from one village to another. You just have to have at least 1 student there. After every journey, a bridge will get destroyed. And when all the bridges to a village are destroyed, no more change can happen in this village anymore. We add a peace marker to indicate that. The game will end at the end of a turn when all of these are on the board, which means there will be 1 bridge remaining. All the bridges will be destroyed except for 1, and players count the number of stacks. You count the number of masters. Doesn't matter the number of students, except as a possible tiebreaker. Different editions have different tiebreakers. That's it. You're ready to play Bridges of Shangri-La. Bridges of Shangri-La is a great example of an OG style or old school German style game. When I talk to hobbyists about the type of game I like, because I feel the need to explain what it is I like about a certain style of game and not another style of game. Why is it that some newer style games leave me dissatisfied? And what is it about older games that satisfy that thing that leaves me unsatisfied? I could have phrased that better. So if we talk about games that are simpler to learn, certainly right now in the zeitgeist, we have what some of us like to call take and makes. Usually there'll be a game that'll have some stuff in the middle, and on your turn, you take one of the things in the middle. And then you add it to your personal tableau, and there's a puzzle there. Maybe you're trying to get certain things next to other things. Maybe you can chain combos and that. But you don't really care what other people do. They can mess you up, but just accidentally, right? It's like, oops, I took the thing that you were hoping to get. Sorry, but they were taking it for themselves. They weren't trying to deny you necessarily. And you can't really pay attention to what other people are doing so much because they got their own board. You can't really see what they're doing. So just, put your head down, focus on your own board, right? That sort of game is, I would say, relatively new if we look at board game history in broad terms. If you go back very far, of course, you're looking at abstract games. And then there was an evolution of abstract that Alex Randolph, and then later his student, Leo Colovini, worked a lot in this space, taking more abstract, even multiplayer abstract games. So chess-like games, sometimes if they were 2-player, they were very chess-like, but then you'd also see multiplayer games with, again, no luck. Often still very simple rules, but now the complexity comes out not from analyzing, if I do this, then they do that, then I do that, right? The back and forth like you would in chess. No, in these sorts of games, because they're multiplayer experiences, you can't look that far ahead. I'm playing a 4-player game. I'm playing with 3 other people. That's 3 elements of chaos that are introduced into the game. So even though a game like Bridges of Shangri-La has no luck, it doesn't feel like a chess-like game because you can't predict too far in advance. Instead, you look and see, what's the game state now? I'm looking at this. I see there's things happening there. There's things happening there. I'm strong here. I'm weak there. It looks like this player is about to do something. And I want to piggyback off that so that on their turn, if they do that thing, I will also benefit. And then after the other players take their turn, it's a new game state. I was like, oh, I didn't expect Joe would do that. Now I need to change my plans. And it's not randomness, it's chaos. It's beautiful chaos. You have to look and see for opportunities, analyze them. You'll be pulled in different directions. And I love that. I see opportunities here, but I'm also seeing that I'm weak there. If I do nothing, then on my next turn, player A could hurt me. But I also know that player B is planning to do something there. So if I do that instead, I can benefit on what player B is doing. But which is more important? What do I focus on? Even though the game is luck-free, I find that the chaos introduced by the other players keeps one from trying to overanalyze the game state. In a game with no luck, it's possible for a player to just spend all their time just focused analyzing the board, right? Trying to plan out all possible moves. Like, if I do this, what will happen? And I find that the actions of the other players are impactful enough to the game state that there's almost no point in doing that. You can analyze the game state and you can identify reasons to do A versus B versus C, and then make your judgment call as to which of these is more important in the here and now. And overanalyzing the game state doesn't give you much of a benefit, because what the other players do has such a big impact on the game state. By the time the turn comes around to you, it'll be very different. And that's not frustrating. That's playing a game with other people. Some games have an opacity to them, in which you know the rules, you learn the rules are really simple, but it's still hard to see how to play well. You can't get that from a first game. You have to play it at least once. You can see how it plays out, and then you see, oh, I can see why this is important and that is important. For my next game, I will do better, right? All board games used to be like that. A lot of games like chess and that are still like that, right? You can't necessarily play against somebody who has played before and think you're going to win right off the bat. You might, but probably not. You probably need to learn how to play a game well. That's a good thing. A game that has depth. There are games that give you a million options, but they're all kind of like a superficial level, right? This option will give me 3 points now. This option gives me 2 points now and 2 points next turn. This option gives me, 6 points at the end of the game, but nothing now, right? And they're all just slight variations, such that there is a breadth of options, but it's only surface level. A game that has depth is one where you play it at the beginning and you don't necessarily know how to play well. That's okay. You play it multiple times and you get better at it, and that's what gives a game longevity. How many games are popular now in the hobby where you play it once and you think this game is amazing, but after you've played it 2 or 3 times, 4 times, you're like, I've seen everything this game has to offer. I still think it's a great game, but I'm not getting anything new out of it anymore. The games you want in your collection long term, I'm going to speak for you. I hope that's okay. I'm telling you what games you should have long term. The games, in my opinion, you should have long term in your collection are games that have a long tail. You learn them and you gain something after that first play. And the second game, you get something new. And the third game, and even after the 5th game or the 10th game, you get something new out of it. Oh, I haven't seen somebody do that before. You play with somebody new, they try something you haven't seen before, and you're surprised. Because the game gives you agency. It gives players the ability to affect the game for everybody and requires players to adapt. Now, for a game that you're hoping to get that experience out of, you want a game with simple rules. Because you have a game with complex rules, what happens? You don't play it for 6 months. You remember liking that game, but you're reluctant to take it off the shelf now. You're going to have to read the rules again. It is a bit of a complex game, so, oh, that's a bit of an effort. But a game that has simple rules that you can remember over the course of years. I don't think I'm ever going to forget how to play Bridges of Shangri-La. And then I know that even if I don't play this for 6 months or a year, I can pull it off the shelf anytime I want and play it, be able to teach it, and still get something new out of it, even after my 10th, 20th, 30th play. Because there's no randomness in the game, it's important to get inside players' heads and figure out what they intend to do on their turn. And usually it's just like the next turn and maybe one turn after that, but you can't be sure because each player is able to affect the game in a fundamental way, right? To change that game state such that your plan for 2 turns from now may not pan out. But that's fine. That's an upper limit that keeps you from trying to look ahead too much. So you just play in the now. I see this area, I'm nervous, right? Because, this player might be triggering a student movement and they're going to crush my masters that are in there because that village is bigger. But you know what I might do? To keep them from doing it, maybe I do it to them preemptively. It would be a bit of a sacrifice, right? I move my student and then they just get destroyed immediately, but destroys the bridge. And now my village that I was coming from is safe from this big village that was threatening before. It can be very important to be able to decide when to trigger a student movement. In my experience, what I found is that what you really want to do is benefit off of other players' play. And that's mostly putting students down in places where other players have already put down students. If other players have trained students in a village, that means that either they're trying to kind of bulk up that village's strength at the minimum, but more likely they hope for those students to travel. And then you get students down, or new masters even. If you think it's at least more than one turn away, you get a master and the next turn to develop a student. Then when that player decides to trigger the journey, your students will go along for the ride and will also benefit. That's ideal because the player triggering the journey, they have control over what happens, but they're not getting new pieces on the board when they do that. They're spreading them around, but there aren't new tokens being added. And so if you're adding tokens and other players are moving them into new villages, over time, it's your pieces that are going to become more plentiful on the board. But of course, it's all a balance. You will see the situation where, your village with students is in danger of being taken over, and you want to get ahead of it, move your students either to, just blow up a bridge and the students are gone, but at least the village is safe, or you move them to a different village before they get displaced. So many considerations in so small a rule set that is simple to learn, and it's all the complexity that comes from the other players and what they do. This game has a longevity to it. This originally was from Cosmos, 2003, and this English printing was from Uberplay, which is an American company, no longer exists. Hasn't been printed in over 20 years. But there are used copies floating around. They have started to become expensive. Now we have this new edition, Play for Keeps. What is added to this? What is new? The rules are pretty much exactly the same, just a very slight change to the tiebreaker at the end of the game, which doesn't really have a big impact. The game does include now rules for 2 players, which I apologize, I have not tried. Bridges of Shangri-La is an amazing game for 3 or 4 players, such that I don't have an interest in the 2-player version, just because I know it would be a bit more chess-like, right, than what I'm looking for anyway. Of course, it's been given a facelift. Box is slightly smaller, the artwork is much more fanciful, and a really great improvement is the pieces, the scholars, are instead of cardboard tokens, they're now wood, which is a much, much needed improvement because pieces are going to be picked up and moved around the board, and wood is just so much easier to pick up than cardboard tokens. Sometimes I find with newer productions of old games, The attempt to refresh the art requires the graphic designer to make some sort of sacrifice in terms of readability. The more color you introduce and the nicer the artwork, you could argue it's subjective, but the nicer the artwork that you introduce, there's always that risk that you have to sacrifice game readability to accommodate that. Maybe it makes the board just a little bit too busy. I find in that sense, this is a refreshingly restrained production where it's improved everything that needs to be improved. Like a lot of people would I think agree with the statement that this art is better than that art, and I think people would welcome this. But I did not notice a sacrifice in readability. The routes from village to village are all still quite clear, and the bridges are a similar tone to the paths. So when you're looking at the board at a glance, the path is continuous. The tokens have icons on them, and the icons are rather iconic. They're simple images, but are differentiated from each other. So again, very easy to read the game state. So this is actually a really nice version. The preview edition I have. There may be changes in the final product. I rate games now. I didn't used to, but I do now. But it's not how good a game is, it's how much I want to keep this game. I rate from 0 to 4 stars. 0, get it out of here ASAP. 1, I will be trading it. 2, it's in my collection for now. Maybe it'll stay, maybe I'll trade it, I don't know. 3, I expect to keep it and would have to accept a rather lopsided trade to get rid of it. And 4, I don't see myself ever getting rid of this game. I expect it to be in my collection a long time. Guess what rating this game is? It is a 4-star game because it's everything I look for in a board game. Simple, easy to remember rules. An interaction, an above-the-table experience where you're making plays that affect other people and you're playing the game together. You're not playing 4 individual games with your heads down. You're all at this table, at this shared experience, and you're affecting each other, and it's a glorious experience. And Leo Colovini has made some great games. And I mean, I don't know which is his magnum opus. Carolus Magnus is up there, but Bridges of Shangri-La is up there too. Amazing this hasn't had a new edition in over 20 years, but I'm glad Play for Keeps has returned to it because it's a great game and it's a great example of the style of game I like. If you like, games like games from Reiner Knizia, but lots of other game designers that work in this space, there's a style of game there that a lot of us really appreciate that kind of peaked in the 90s and probably the early 2000s was the peak, actually, now that I think about it. Because we have games like Bridges of Shangri-La, we have games like Santiago, came out, I think, 2004. These games are almost the peak, the pinnacle of the style of game that I love the most. And you owe it to yourself to try the style of game, just to see if it's the style of game for you. If you like the newer stuff, you prefer the newer style of game, the takes and makes, as we say, that's fine. There's so many games coming out, there's going to be games for everybody. This is an older style of game, and one that I'm glad publishers like Play for Keeps are making sure that those games still stay in the zeitgeist. Don't forget about this game, guys. This is still a great game. That old school German style game is, I say German style, Colovini's Italian, but it was originally published by a German company. And I say that style of game because most of the designers who work in that space are German. That style of game, to me, board games peaked with that. So if you're curious about this style of game, this is a great example of one that I recommend you check out. Thank you personally, for watching. And remember, older games like Bridges of Shangri-La do not stop being good. They do not stop being good. They don't just because newer games come out. Remember that. And take care.